Welcome all, Bradford here. This is our first look at Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. Now, my videos are mainly going to be concerned with explaining some of the lore things that you're going to see throughout the game and how it fits into the greater lore that is established already, the greater canon of Middle-earth. Now, just to throw this out there, uh, canon in Lord of the Rings is kind of disputed even amongst Tolkienists, because what can you truly consider to be canon? Is canon only what was published during Tolkien's lifetime, or do we add in even some of the things that we see in the Silmarillion or in, the Unfinished Tales, the History of Middle Earth series that Christopher Tolkien edited and released? So a lot of times when you hear people talk about canon, it's more than likely going to be what's in The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and more often than not, the Silmarillion as well. Though, like I said, that's even open to debate. So let's get started. Now, the game takes place in Mordor, in between the years of the ending of The Hobbit and the beginning of The Lord of the Rings. There's a 60-year gap. So this story takes place, in fact, I believe it takes place right at the end of The Hobbit when Sauron has made it back to Mordor, essentially fleeing his stronghold in Dol Guldur and making it back to Mordor. You follow you play the role of the Ranger Talion. Now, Talion is a Ranger of Ithilien, I believe, or just a standard Ranger of Gondor. I think they make that difference. This is different than the Rangers of the North, the Rangers that you would most likely associate with Aragorn and the Dunedain in the North. Now, if he's truly a Ranger of Ithilien, then he is descendant from those ancient Númenóreans as well, however distantly. If he's just a Ranger of Gondor, then he may just be a regular old Gondorian with absolutely no Númenórean blood in him. May just be the blood of what's quote unquote called that of lesser men. Um, we see here Talion and his son sparring, and a lot of the combat has been kind of attributed to being influenced by Batman Arkham Asylum. I also found a lot of Assassin's Creed nuances in it, but Arkham Asylum is probably the closest fit. It relies heavily on parrying and countering, but you also can, swiftly attack your enemy yourself. Whereas in Assassin's Creed, it's a lot easier if you're just sitting there parrying and then countering with a vicious cut or a deadly blow. Now, this game also gives you the ability to go ahead and do on-the-fly executions depending on how your kill streak is set up. We'll go more into the gameplay as we progress through the game. Now, we see here that the stronghold that they are currently defending are obviously being attacked by Uruks. There is a difference between Uruks and Orcs. Uruks are typically a little bit stronger. They're usually larger than regular orcs, and so because of that, they often bully the lesser creatures. Sauron creates his own Uruks, and more often than not, incorrectly, he's attributed with breeding the Uruks, but Uruks were first bred by Sauron. There are, Uruks from Mordor and Uruks from Saruman. Though Sarumans are usually thought of to be the only ones that can, move in open sunlight, which a lot of times is up for debate as well. Now, one thing I'm really liking about the gameplay in Shadow of Mordor is you never seem as though you're locked into an animation. As you saw there, I was finishing, an enemy down on the ground, but yet I needed to parry, and so it actually stopped that finishing move and allowed me to parry mid-move. Whereas in any other game, chances are it would have tried to finish that animation first. So it is a lot more fluid than other counter-based combat games that I've played in the past.
Go find your mother. Go find your mother. Keep her safe. I'll be right behind you. Go.
Now, obviously, one of the premises in the story is that Talion is dead, and he's kept to linger by the wraith inhabiting his body and thus resurrecting him, causing him to not go to wherever it is the souls of men end up going when they die. Um, The elves say they go where we know not whither. Um, it's unknown exactly what happens to the souls of men when they die. There's only one instance of a man being brought back to life in Lord of the Rings, and that's the instance of Beden being brought back by Luthien. But the kicker there was that Luthien gave up her immortality in order for it to happen. So there is some sort of, well, it's been done before, so maybe by allowing this wraith's body to linger, connected to Talion's body, that's how we kind of talk about it. That's how we, you know, make it so it fits. The other thing is, and it'll be alluded to a little bit later on, is that you're cursed. And this is something that crops up, which I'll go into a little bit more detail as we get to that part and talk a little bit more about that. But that is something that happens in the Lord of the Rings.
I still have a few friends left in Gondor.
Did you talk to my father?
Yes, I did. And nothing has changed. He's still very stubborn.
I say we go anyway.
Dear, I will not come willingly.
There must be a better.
Now, obviously, something has happened in the past that we don't know yet. But his wife is definitely not happy to be there, but she's sticking by him no matter what. There's obviously some love between these two characters. I do love the little hint of when you snuck up onto your wife, you had the option to kiss her. I thought was pretty cool. I did wonder what would happen if I accidentally pressed the wrong button and maybe, well, actually the attack button in this game is X, so there was no way to, I guess, attack her. Now the sneak mechanics here are pretty cool, though I'm still not getting used to them. It's not a toggle sneak like in other games, like in the Elder Scrolls. You can just press the button and you're in sneak until you unpress it. With this, you have to hold it down, and a lot of times in these games, this is a button that's used for like heavy action. So I'm not used to having to hold down the right trigger in order to make this happen. The other thing is the sneak kind of seems as though the Uruks themselves are either really dumb or I'm playing on a really easy difficulty, because I figured they would have seen me by now.
Put the sword down, Ranger.
Now right there you saw a little bit of that competition between the orcs themselves and the orc captains. Not all of the orcs obviously like each other. They serve the same master, so they're going towards one common goal, but they are just as easy to turn on each other as they are to turn on you. So this is a character who's named the Black Hand of Sauron. And what's going on is something that we've seen in Lord of the Rings games in the past, just maybe not to this degree. Obviously, there's a blood sacrifice going on. He's chanting something in the Black Speech, and he's obviously sacrificing these characters to achieve some end. And sacrifice is something that does crop up in Tolkien's Legendarium. If you hold the contents of the Silmarillion to be true canon, then this happens when Sauron is taken captive in Numenor. He eventually rises to the rank of one of the king's chief counselors, and it essentially instills the worship of Melkor in the darkness. And one of the things that he does during his tenure is he sacrifices those who are called the faithful, those who still hold to Iluvatar and the faith of the elves. And so sacrifice in itself is not something that's unheard of, but it is something that you don't see too much of. Like I said, we did see it in another Lord of the Rings game. It is something that happens in the Lord of the Rings Online, though it's not as obvious as it is here. During some of the original men quests, you see some of the brigands being sacrificed in order to summon the Kargals, though it's never as blatant as what you see here. Now, as far as the chanting and stuff goes, and whether or not it needs to be a blood sacrifice, that I think is more embellishment than anything else. But I do want to point out, sacrifice did happen in in the Silmarillion, and we don't know exactly what was going on inside the temples that the people were being sacrificed in. Um,
Then how do we
all we know is it was horrible, and it's something that obviously was so dark that Tolkien didn't spend a ton of time writing about. Now here they're kind of talking about that curse, and the curse that's being placed upon them we'll talk a little bit about in the next video. Thanks so much, guys, for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment, as well as follow me on Twitter at LOTRLore. Until next time, guys, Namarie.